Hello, my loyal listeners. How good it is to know that you are always near. Chloe woke up to the smell of coffee. Thick, bold, with notes of caramel. Exactly the way she loved it. On the nightstand sat a white ceramic mug, and next to it lay a sticky note. You are the most beautiful when you sleep, but even more beautiful when you wake up. Breakfast is on the table. Love you. She smiled, stretched, and picked up the mug. The coffee was the perfect temperature. Matt always seemed to guess the exact moment she was about to open her eyes. Over 12 years of marriage, he had learned her rhythms better than his own. Chloe took a sip and looked at the framed photograph on the dresser, Leo, with Matt, building sandcastles at the beach in Florida 3 years ago. Their son was 7 then. He was building a massive fortress out of sand, and Matt was helping him. Both of them were laughing so hard that Chloe's stomach hurt just watching them. She had thought to herself back then, this is it. Happiness, simple, tangible, and as warm as this morning coffee. She walked downstairs to the kitchen. Leo was already sitting at the kitchen island, poking at his scrambled eggs with a fork. "Mom," Dad said, "we're going fishing at the lake on Saturday. Are you coming with us?" "We'll see." Chloe kissed her son on the top of his head. "If I finish my project on time." Chloe worked as an architect in a boutique downtown firm. She loved designing homes, not cold, glass and steel modern monoliths, but cozy, human spaces with wide window seats, wraparound porches, and creaky hardwood floors. Matt used to joke that she didn't design buildings, she designed feelings, and there was a lot of truth in that joke. Matt was the director of sales for a large, rapidly growing commercial construction company. For the past year, he had been disappearing at work until late at night. New contracts, endless negotiations, constant business trips across the country. Chloe understood. Climbing the corporate ladder required sacrifices. She herself often sat over blueprints until midnight. They were a team tired, overwhelmed, but still a team, or so she thought. The first warning bell rang in October. Matt returned from a trip to Chicago a day early, but didn't warn her. Chloe accidentally saw his SUV parked at the local shopping mall when she was driving to pick Leo up from soccer practice. Overjoyed, she dialed his number, but he didn't answer. He called back 20 minutes later. "Sorry, babe. I was in a meeting. My phone was on silent." She didn't think much of it. It happens to everyone. Then came the little things. The smartphone he suddenly started taking with him even into the shower. A new cologne, not the cedarwood one she had bought him for their anniversary, but something else, sharp and unfamiliar. The late evening conference calls after which he didn't come home tired, but rather distracted, as if his mind were a million miles away. Chloe chased the suspicions away. She was the kind of woman who trusted her husband until she saw undeniable proof with her own eyes. Her mother, Martha, had drilled it into her head her whole life. Trust a man until he gives you a reason to doubt. But if he does, do not forgive him. Never forgive. Martha knew what she was talking about. Chloe's father had left when she was 11. He just packed a suitcase on a Sunday morning and said, "I've fallen in love with another woman." No drama, no screaming matches. He said it as casually as reading the weather forecast. Martha didn't cry in front of her daughter, but Chloe heard her mother sobbing at night, biting her pillow to muffle the screams. Those sounds were burned into her memory like a brand. Because of that, Chloe refused to see the obvious. Because to see it meant to acknowledge it, and to acknowledge it meant becoming her mother. It meant hearing those exact same sobs, only this time, they would be her own. November brought a bitter chill, and not just outside the windows. Matt became distant. No, he still brewed the morning coffee, kissed her before leaving for the office, and asked about Leo's report card, but a mechanical quality had crept into all of it, as if he were executing a perfectly rehearsed routine. Jess, Chloe's best friend, was the first to notice. "You've lost weight," she said as they sat at a Starbucks after work, "and you have dark circles under your eyes. What's going on?" "Just tired. I have a deadline burning." "Chloe, I've known you for 15 years. You're lying to my face right now." Chloe stayed silent, turning the paper cup in her hands. Then, very quietly, she said, "I think Matt is cheating on me." She expected Jess to comfort her, to say, "Don't make things up. You know how much he loves you." But her friend just looked her in the eyes, a long, serious look, and asked, "Do you have proof?" "No, just a gut feeling." You know, it's like living in a house and suddenly noticing that a load-bearing wall has shifted just a fraction of an inch. Everything seems to be in its place, but something is intangibly wrong. "You're an architect," Jess said. "If the wall shifted, check the foundation." Chloe checked. That very evening, Matt left for yet another dinner meeting, and she opened his MacBook. He hadn't changed his password. It was still their wedding anniversary. There was a cruel irony in that. The messages were on a desktop chat app, not hidden, not deleted, as if it had never even crossed his mind that his wife would go looking. Or maybe he just didn't care. The woman's name was Vanessa. Judging by her profile pictures, she was young, maybe 27, with long dark hair and a bright, blinding smile. Their text history stretched back to September. 2 months. 2 months of lies. Chloe read the messages, and her fingers turned to ice. Not from the explicit content, there was nothing overly graphic, but from the sheer tenderness. The plans to meet at downtown hotels, the photos of expensive dinners, the inside jokes, the freezing cold radiated from inside her, from the exact spot where her trust used to live. She closed the laptop, walked up the carpeted stairs, and peeked into Leo's room. Her son was fast asleep, arms thrown wide, smiling at some dream. Chloe leaned against the doorframe and stood there for a long time, feeling the world she had spent 12 years building crack wide open. Then she walked back downstairs, sat at the kitchen island, and waited for her husband. Matt came home around 11:30, upbeat, smelling of that foreign cologne. He saw Chloe and froze. "You're still awake?" "No," she said, her voice completely flat. "I'm not awake. Sit down. We need to talk." Matt sat across from her, moving slowly, cautiously, like a man who already realizes what has happened but is desperately hoping he is wrong. Chloe watched his eyes dart across the marble countertop, to her tightly clasped hands, and finally, to the dark screen of the MacBook sitting on the edge of the island. She saw his pupils dilate. He recognized it. He usually kept that laptop in his upstairs home office. "Chloe, don't. Stop," she cut him off. "Don't start with my name in that tone of voice. Just tell me if it's true." He could have lied. He had a few seconds. An absolute eternity for a man whose entire career was based on negotiating, persuading, and selling. Matt knew how to pick words like picking locks, but that night, he remained completely silent, and his silence was louder than any confession. "How long?" Chloe asked. "Since September." His voice was hollow, unrecognizable. 2 months. For 2 months you brewed my morning coffee, kissed me goodnight, and then drove to another woman. How did you do it, Matt? Purely from a technical standpoint. Do you have some kind of switch in your brain? He rubbed his face with both hands. Chloe knew that gesture. It was what he did when a situation was spiraling out of his control. When Leo was rushed to the ER with appendicitis, when the pipes burst and flooded their old apartment, when a multi-million-dollar contract fell through at work, he rubbed his face as if trying to erase reality and draw a new one. "I didn't plan it. It just happened." "Happened," Chloe repeated. The word sounded like a slap across the face. Rain happens. Car crashes happen. Cheating is a choice. Every single time you texted her. Every time you lied to me about your evening meetings. Every time you got into bed next to me after being with her. That was a choice, Matt. Your conscious, deliberate choice. He lowered his head, and Chloe suddenly realized that she wasn't feeling what she thought she would. No rage, no hysterics. Inside, it was just empty and echoing, like an unfinished house. The framing is up, but there is no life inside. "Should I leave?" he asked quietly. Yes. He stood up, lingered for a moment, looking at her as if he wanted to add something. Then he turned and walked away. Chloe heard him go upstairs, heard the rustle of a duffel bag, the click of the closet door. 15 minutes later, the front door clicked shut, and the engine of his SUV rumbled to life in the driveway. The silence that followed was deafening. Chloe sat at the kitchen island until sunrise. She didn't cry. The tears came later, 3 days later, when Leo asked over dinner, "Mom, when is Dad getting back from his business trip?" She turned toward the sink, turned the faucet on full blast, and sobbed soundlessly while her son finished his mac and cheese. She told Leo that Dad had to travel for work for a week. Then a week turned into a little longer, and finally, she had to tell him a version of the truth. Dad and I have decided to live in separate houses for a little bit. It's not permanent, and it has absolutely nothing to do with you. Do you hear me? Never. It is not your fault. Leo didn't cry. At 10 years old, he was a very reserved kid, just like his father. He just became quieter than usual and completely stopped asking to go fishing. When Martha found out, she drove over the very next day. Chloe opened the front door to see her mother standing there in a trench coat, holding an overnight bag, with an expression that spelled absolute doom for Matt. "I knew it," Martha said, stepping over the threshold. "I felt from the very beginning that he was unreliable. Remember at your wedding rehearsal, I told you." "Mom, please, not right now." Martha stopped, looked at her daughter pale, exhausted, with dark purple bags under her eyes, and suddenly hugged her so tightly that Chloe completely broke down. She cried into her mother's shoulder just like she did when she was a little girl who fell off her bike and scraped both her knees. "File for divorce," her mother said, stroking her hair. "Don't drag it out. The faster you cut out the infection, the faster it heals." Chloe filed the petition. 2 weeks later, she walked into the county courthouse, stood in line, and filled out the paperwork. Her hand didn't tremble. She made sure of it. Next to her sat a woman around her age, with red, bloodshot eyes, and Chloe thought, "We're all the same in here. We all thought our marriages were different, that the statistics would pass us by, that our story was the exception." Matt found out about the petition the same day. He called. She didn't pick up. He called again. She turned her phone off. So, he drove over. He stood on her front porch, soaked from the autumn rain, without an umbrella, with a lost, desperate look on his face that she had never seen before. Chloe opened the door only because Leo might hear the knocking. "Leave," she said. "Chloe, I'm begging you. Just 5 minutes. You had 2 months. Every single day, you had 5 minutes to tell me the truth. You never used them. I was an idiot, I know. But I can't lose you and Leo. I just can't. You should have thought about that earlier." She shut the heavy wooden door, leaned her back against it, and listened to him standing on the other side. 1 minute, 2, 5. Then his footsteps shuffled down the wet concrete steps. But Matt didn't give up. The next day, a bouquet was left by the door. Nothing extravagant or flashy, just a simple bunch of white daisies, her favorite. The note read, "I am guilty. I know, but I want to fight for us." Chloe threw the flowers straight into the trash can by the garage. Then she stood by the kitchen window, watching the white petals stick out of the garbage, feeling disgusting for some inexplicable reason. He came by every day, sometimes with flowers, sometimes without. Sometimes he just stood by the mailbox, as if standing guard. Dorothy, her elderly neighbor across the street, shook her head. 20 years ago, if my husband had stood out there like that, maybe we wouldn't have gotten a divorce. Yours is a fool, obviously, but he loves you." Chloe didn't answer. She didn't know what she felt. Anger and deep sorrow had blended inside her so tightly that she couldn't separate one from the other. 3 weeks later, Matt called again. This time, she picked up she didn't even know why. "I dumped her," he said. His voice was raspy, like he hadn't slept in days. "Immediately. The night you found out. I've been living on Dave's couch, going to the office, and lying awake every single night. Because I can't stop thinking about what a piece of garbage I've been. And what do you want from me? A medal for self-awareness? No. I want a chance. Just one. I know I don't deserve it, but I am begging you." Chloe stayed silent. She listened to his heavy, uneven breathing through the phone. She remembered how he had breathed the exact same way when he proposed to her, standing in the middle of Central Park, gripping the velvet box, his hands shaking. She had felt both amused and incredibly tender toward him, this big, confident man, trembling like a teenager. "I'll think about it," she said, and hung up. Thinking about it dragged on for a week. Chloe consulted Jess, who was uncompromising. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Don't lie to yourself. She consulted her mother, who was even more ruthless. Your father begged for a second chance, too. I didn't give it to him, and thank God I didn't, or he would have just betrayed me again. She even asked Dorothy, who just shrugged and said, "Listen to your heart, honey. The head gives terrible advice in these matters." But her heart was silent, or speaking too softly, drowned out by resentment. And then Matt showed up on a Saturday morning. Leo opened the door, saw his dad, and practically tackled him. Matt scooped his son up, held him tight against his chest, and Chloe saw tears streaming down Matt's face. Matt was crying for the first time in the 12 years she had known him. Even at his father's funeral, he hadn't shed a tear. But here he was, standing in the doorway, clutching a 10-year-old boy, weeping silently, his shoulders shaking. Leo wrapped his arms around his dad's neck and whispered, "Dad, are you coming back?" Chloe looked away, gripping the edge of the granite counter so hard her knuckles turned white. Matt put his son down and kneeled in front of him. "That depends on Mom, buddy. I want to come back more than anything, but I hurt Mom very badly, and now it's her decision." Leo looked at Chloe, not pleadingly, just looking at her with his serious, uncharacteristically mature eyes. And in that split second, Chloe realized she hated Matt. She hated him for putting her in this impossible position. She was the one who had to decide. She was the one holding the axe. It was entirely on her whether her son got to have his father under the same roof. All the weight was on her shoulders, while he kneeled there, suffering beautifully, with wet eyes. But the anger passed, because Chloe looked at Leo and saw herself at 11 years old, standing in the hallway while her father walked out with a suitcase. She remembered the feeling her entire universe collapsing while the adults pretended everything was fine. She did not want that for her son, so she began to forgive, to take a risk, to risk being betrayed again, to risk hearing silence instead of the truth. That night, after putting Leo to bed, Chloe poured herself a glass of Pinot Noir for the first time in a month and sat out on the back patio, despite the November chill. The stars hung low, sharp and bright. She thought about how the houses she designed could always be rebuilt after a crack. You could reinforce the foundation, replace the support beams, pour new concrete, but only if the original structure was inherently solid. If the foundation is rotten, no amount of renovations will save it. Was their foundation solid? 12 years. Thousands of morning cups of coffee, nights spent tangled together, sicknesses, joys, Leo's first word, his first step. That had to be real, right? Or had she just invented it? Chloe finished her wine, walked back inside, and sent Matt a single-word text, "Come." Matt arrived the next morning. No flowers, no grand romantic gestures. Just wearing a clean button-down shirt, freshly shaven, with dark circles under his eyes that proved his sleepless nights. Chloe opened the door and wordlessly let him in. Leo was at her mother's. Chloe had specifically asked Martha to take her grandson for the weekend. They sat at the kitchen island, the exact same spot where, a month ago, she had told him to get out. Matt rested his hands on the marble, and she noticed his fingers were trembling. "Talk," Chloe said, and he talked. He didn't make excuses, didn't shift the blame, didn't claim he was exhausted or going through a midlife crisis. He spoke quietly, looking directly into her eyes, and there was something in his voice she hadn't heard in a very long time. Genuine, unmasked vulnerability. "I don't know why it happened. That's not an excuse, Chloe. It's just the truth. I still don't understand it. Everything was fine between us. You didn't do anything wrong. It's me. I felt like I had stopped feeling things. Not just you. Everything. It was like my life was covered in a thick layer of plastic wrap, and I couldn't touch anything real. And then Vanessa showed up, and for a second, I thought the plastic wrap was gone. But it wasn't gone. No, it just changed. And for that illusion, you destroyed our family. Yes, and I will have to live with that for the rest of my life. But I want to live with it next to you, if you'll let me." Chloe stayed silent, looking at his hands. Familiar, strong hands. The hands that had slid a wedding ring onto her finger 12 years ago. The hands that had held a newborn Leo. The hands that wrapped around her in the dark. The hands that typed those messages to another woman. "You need to know something," she finally said. "If I agree to this, it is your very last chance. There won't be a third one. No conversations, no explanations, no tears. I will simply walk out the door, and you will never see us again. Do you understand?" I understand. No, you don't. You think you do, but I need you to feel it in your bones. If you lie to me again, even once, even about something trivial, I won't ask questions. I will take Leo, and we will vanish from your life. That's not a threat, Matt. It's a promise. He nodded, and Chloe saw real, unfeigned fear in his eyes, the sheer terror of loss. Maybe for the first time in this whole ordeal, he truly grasped how close to the cliff's edge he was standing. They agreed on the ground rules. Matt wasn't moving back in immediately. It had to be gradual. He would come over on weekends to see Leo. They would eat dinner together, go for walks, piecing normalcy back together scrap by scrap. Concurrently, couples therapy, Chloe insisted, and Matt agreed without a single argument. The first month was intensely bizarre. They were relearning how to exist in the same space, like two people learning to walk again after a debilitating illness. Awkward conversations over dinner, accidental brushes of the hand that made them both flinch. Leo watched his parents with quiet, desperate hope and tried to behave flawlessly. He never made a mess, cleaned his room, did his homework without being asked. It broke Chloe's heart. The child was terrified that any misstep on his part would shatter their fragile truce. Their therapist, a stern-looking woman named Dr. Brenda Hayes, saw them in a small office with plush armchairs and dim lighting. In their very first session, she said something that stuck in Chloe's brain. To forgive doesn't mean to forget. It means to stop punishing both yourself and him. Chloe didn't know how to do either yet. She woke up in the middle of the night with a crushing weight on her chest and checked her phone, not hers, the old creeping paranoia that Matt was lying to her somewhere. Sometimes she dialed his number at 2 a.m. just to hear his groggy voice and confirm he was actually at Dave's apartment. Matt never complained. He never once said, "You still don't trust me?" He just answered the phone. "I'm here," he would say. "Go back to sleep." And she would fall asleep briefly, anxiously, but she would sleep. By the end of the second month, the ice started to thaw. Matt began coming over on weekdays too, picking Leo up from school, helping him with his math homework. One day, Chloe came home from the architectural firm and found both of them in the kitchen. Leo was standing on a step stool stirring batter, while Matt, covered in flour, was trying to decipher the recipe for an apple pie. The pie came out lopsided and burnt on one edge, but Chloe ate 2 slices and, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she genuinely, deeply laughed. That night, Matt didn't go back to his friend's couch. Chloe asked him to stay. They lay side by side in the dark, not touching, just breathing. Then Chloe rested her head on his shoulder, and he completely froze, as if terrified of scaring her away. "I'm withdrawing the divorce petition," she said into the darkness. Matt didn't say a word. He just pulled her closer, and she felt his heart hammering against his ribs fast, loud, terrified. The next morning, she called the county clerk, verified the procedure, and made an appointment. Withdrawing the petition turned out to be much easier than filing it. Just a few signatures, a brief exchange with the clerk, and the mandatory question, "Are you certain?" Chloe was certain. For the first time in 3 months, she felt solid ground beneath her feet. Walking out of the courthouse, Chloe paused on the concrete steps. The crisp winter sun was blinding. The air was sharp and clean. She took a deep breath and smiled. She decided not to call Matt, but to drive to his office park, tell him in person, and watch his face when he realized she had chosen him, that their family was going to survive. She drove across the city through the congested downtown traffic, past snow-covered suburban lawns and shop windows adorned with holiday decorations. Her mood was light, almost festive. Chloe even turned the radio on for the first time in months, singing along to some cheesy pop song, completely off-key. Matt's office was on the 4th floor of an upscale corporate building. Chloe took the elevator up, stepping into the familiar hallway with its gray walls and frosted glass partitions. The receptionist recognized her and smiled. "Matt is in his office. Go right on in." Chloe walked down the hall. Her heels clicked against the tile, the sound echoing off the walls like a metronome. His office door was slightly ajar, and she could hear his voice. Matt was on the phone. Chloe raised her hand to knock, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the tone of his voice, not professional, not soft, but smug, laced with a lazy chuckle. Yeah, I told you. The idiot took the bait. Chloe froze. Her hand hovered in the air, inches from the wood. The blood drained from her face. She stood in the hallway, pressing her shoulder against the drywall, listening. Her body no longer felt like her own. Her legs turned to lead. Her fingers went numb, and a strange, ringing vacuum opened up inside her head. Matt kept talking. So, the house is safe, and my equity in the business stays entirely with me. 2 months crawling on my knees, but hey, look at the result. Listen, Vanessa, with women, it's all about patience. They're all the same, they scream, they cry, and then they just want to believe you. It's easier for them. Chloe is no exception. Supposed to be smart, but she fell for it like a little girl. She withdrew the divorce papers today. That's it. I'm totally clear. A pause. He listened to whatever was being said on the other end, then let out a short, careless laugh. Of course I'll come over. I'll just tell her I have a late dinner meeting tonight. The classic routine never fails. All right, babe, kiss you. I gotta finish this quarterly report. Click. Silence. Chloe had no memory of leaving the building. She didn't remember the elevator, didn't remember the lobby, didn't remember if she nodded back to the receptionist. She only snapped back to reality when she was standing outside in the freezing wind, realizing she had left her scarf in the car. The wind bit at her cheeks, but she felt no cold. Inside, there was something much worse than the cold. It was as if someone had opened the door to a room she thought was warm and safe, only to reveal absolute nothingness. No walls, no floor, no ceiling, just a black, bottomless pit. She got into her car. Her hands were shaking so violently she couldn't get the key into the ignition on the first try, or the second. On the third try, the engine roared to life, but she didn't put it in drive. She just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead with unseeing eyes. The idiot took the bait. 6 words. 6 words. And the entire house of cards she had so carefully, so agonizingly rebuilt over 2 months, completely disintegrated into dust. No, it didn't just disintegrate. It was never there to begin with. She had been building on a void, on lies, on the cold calculation of the man she had trusted with her life. He hadn't dumped Vanessa. He never had any intention of dumping her. The tears, the sleepless nights, the raspy voice on the phone, the trembling hands at the kitchen counter, all of it was a performance. Meticulously scripted, flawlessly executed, with perfectly timed pauses and the exact required dosage of fake remorse. 2 months, on his knees, all because his suburban house and his business equity were on the line. Not her. Not Leo. Not their family. His assets. Chloe suddenly let out a laugh. A quiet, terrifying laugh entirely devoid of joy. She laughed, then fell dead silent. She pulled out her phone, found Jess's contact, and hit dial. Jess. Her voice was raspy, completely unrecognizable. Can you come meet me? I need help. Jess arrived in 20 minutes. Chloe was still sitting in her car in the office park lot. Her friend opened the passenger door, looked inside, and instantly understood everything. She didn't ask what happened, didn't offer empty platitudes. She just got in, shut the door, and said, "Tell me," Chloe told her. Word for word, she recounted the phone call she had just overheard. Jess listened in absolute silence, and Chloe watched her friend's face darken, her jaw muscles clenching tight. "Scumbag," Jess said when Chloe finished. It was said calmly, almost in a businesslike tone. "Okay, you withdrew the petition. That's bad, but we can refile. You need a shark, Chloe. A real lawyer. Not someone who's going to nod sympathetically, but someone who will gut him on the witness stand. I'm not thinking about court right now. Well, you have to." He just admitted that he crawled on his knees for 2 months to protect his house and his business. That means there is serious money to divide, and he knows it. If you fall apart right now, he's going to prep, transfer the assets, hide the money in offshore LLCs. Men like him know how to do that. Chloe looked at her friend. Jess was a corporate lawyer, not a divorce attorney, but she understood the mechanics of warfare, and right now, she wasn't comforting her. She was mobilizing. She had switched into the exact mode she used when ripping apart opposing counsel, ruthless, precise, systematic. Listen to me, Jess continued. I know what you're feeling right now, but you have Leo to think about. You are not allowed to fall apart. If you need to fall apart, I will give you the space to do it later. I promise. We will buy a case of wine and you can cry for 3 days straight. But right now, we handle business. Chloe nodded. Jess was right. Emotions came later. Right now, she had to think. They drove back to Jess's place. On the way, Chloe called her mother and asked her to keep Leo for one more night. Martha started asking questions, but Chloe cut her off. Mom, later. Please, just later. Martha heard the deadness in her daughter's voice and stopped asking. In Jess's kitchen, over a cup of chamomile tea, Chloe finally allowed herself to break down. But she didn't cry the way she had before, out of hurt or betrayal. These tears were different. They were furious, bitter, and hot, purging the dark, toxic venom that had been accumulating in her veins for 2 months. I actually believed him, Jess. I really believed him. He was crying. Do you understand? He stood in our doorway holding our son, and he wept. How could he do that? How could someone play a game like that? Is he even human? Jess sat next to her, holding her tight, saying nothing. Sometimes silence is the only honest answer. When the tears finally stopped, Chloe splashed cold water on her face, looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, swollen face, bloodshot eyes, and said to herself, out loud, enough. She said it with absolute conviction, like swearing an oath. Not to herself, but to Leo. Her son deserved a mother who could stand on her own 2 feet, not a victim, not a broken woman quietly swallowing her tears by the kitchen sink. A mother who knew how to protect herself, and him. That evening, Jess called a contact, a divorce attorney named Diane Sterling. She was a ruthless, seasoned veteran with a reputation that made unfaithful husbands sick to their stomachs. Jess set up a meeting for the very next morning. Chloe got home late. The house greeted her with its usual silence. But now that silence felt entirely different. It used to feel empty, lonely. Now, it felt calm. Chloe walked through the rooms, running her fingers over the drywall, the doorknobs, the spines of the books on the shelves. This house was bought with their joint income, but the mortgage was solely in her name. It had been a better interest rate at the time. She remembered that detail, and for the first time, she thought about the impending divorce not as a tragedy, but as a math problem. Every problem has variables, constraints, and a solution. She was an architect. She solved structural problems for a living. Her phone buzzed at 10 p.m. Matt? Hey, babe. His voice was cheerful, dripping with affection. How was your day? I heard you swung by the office, but missed me. Chloe's blood ran cold. The receptionist. Of course she had told him his wife had stopped by. Yeah, Chloe answered, her voice perfectly even. I wanted to surprise you, but you weren't at your desk. Bummer. I just stepped out for a minute. Let's grab lunch tomorrow. Celebrate. You know, our fresh start. Our fresh start. Chloe felt a wave of nausea hit the back of her throat, but she clamped down on it. Jess had warned her. Not a single word about what you know. Not a hint. Until you talk to Diane, until we build the strategy, you play the role. She had to play the part of the naive, forgiving, blissfully happy wife. Let's do it, she said. 1 o'clock? Perfect. Love you, Chloe. She closed her eyes, squeezing the phone so hard her fingers cramped. Love you too, she cooed softly, almost tenderly. She hung up, placed the phone on the counter, and stood completely still for a long time. She felt something solidifying inside her chest, right where hope had lived just that morning. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't hurt. It was resolve. Cold, sharp, and clear as the winter morning outside. Matt wanted a war. He was going to get one. Only he had no idea he wouldn't be fighting the gullible, trusting Chloe who cried by the sink and believed in his fake remorse. He would be fighting the other Chloe, the one who was no longer afraid of tearing down walls, because she knew exactly how to build new ones. Diane Sterling turned out to be a petite woman in her 50s, with a sharp bob haircut and the piercing gray eyes of a hawk. Her office was minimalist, devoid of any warmth, a glass desk, 2 chairs, filing cabinets, and a single framed photograph on the wall of her shaking hands with a federal judge. No plants, no cozy sofas, Nobody came here for comfort. They came here for blood. Walk me through it, she said, skipping the pleasantries. Chloe told her, concisely, dryly, entirely devoid of emotion. She had rehearsed the delivery all night in front of her mirror to make sure her voice wouldn't crack. Diane listened, taking shorthand notes on a legal pad. She didn't interrupt, didn't gasp, didn't shake her head in sympathy. When Chloe finished, the lawyer paused for a few seconds, tapping her expensive pen against the desk. Do you have a recording of the phone call? No, I was just standing in the hallway. A shame, but not a deal breaker. Okay, here is where we stand. Your situation is complex, but highly workable. The mortgage is in your name. That is excellent. His business, that's a different beast. If the equity is tied up in an LLC, extracting your half is harder, but absolutely not impossible. I need paperwork, marriage certificate, mortgage statements, tax returns, and everything you know about his assets. Brokerage accounts, 401ks, cars, company shares. The more paper we have, the bigger the hammer. He's probably already hiding money, Chloe said. He admitted on the phone that the whole Reconciliation Act was just to secure his assets. Hiding assets is much harder than people think, especially if the idiot didn't plan it years in advance, Diane said, a predatory smirk crossing her face. And since he thinks you took the bait, he's going to get sloppy. He thinks the danger has passed, which means he probably hasn't finalized the transfers yet. We have a window, a small one, but it's open. Chloe walked out of the law office, clutching a manila folder filled with instructions. She felt a strange sensation, as if she had just strapped on a Kevlar vest. Heavy, uncomfortable, but bulletproof. The next 2 weeks were a psychological torture test. Chloe lived a double life. By day, she hunted down bank statements, drove to Diane's office, photographed tax documents, and mapped out 401k balances. By night, she smiled at Matt, ate dinner with him, discussed Leo's upcoming science fair, and played the role of the overjoyed, reconciled wife. And with every passing day, the acting got easier. Not because the pain was fading, but because her anger was calcifying, turning into an impenetrable armor. Matt suspected nothing. He was relaxed, jovial, generous. He brought her gifts, joked around during dinner, wrestled with Leo on the carpet. Chloe watched him and was genuinely horrified by how effortlessly he flipped the switch, how naturally he played the devoted husband and doting father, knowing full well that later that night he would drive to Vanessa's apartment. There was not an ounce of true remorse in his body. Never was. He simply moved through life, doing whatever was most convenient for him, using human beings as stepping stones. The hardest part of the charade was Leo. Her son had completely blossomed seeing his parents back together. He became talkative again, laughing loudly at the dinner table, chattering about school, his friends, and the new gym coach who blew his whistle too loud. Chloe looked at his beaming face and felt her soul tearing in half. She knew that what she was about to do would nuke his world a second time, and this time, there would be no rebuilding it. But keeping things as they were meant raising him in a house built on a lie, and sooner or later, Leo would figure it out. Kids always smell the rot. Maybe not today, but they feel it. Mom, are you and Dad gonna stop fighting for real? He asked one night as she tucked him in. Chloe sat on the edge of his bed, brushing his bangs out of his eyes. Leo, she said softly, no matter what happens in this world, we both love you so much. Always. That is the only thing I can promise you. He looked at her with those intense, adult eyes and nodded, as if he understood the subtext of what she wasn't saying. A week later, Diane called her in. She had news. I ran a forensic sweep on your husband's public and semi-public financials, the lawyer said, spreading spreadsheets across her glass desk. Fascinating stuff. The commercial construction firm he works for? He isn't just the director of sales. He's a partner. He holds 20% equity, registered under his own name, acquired 3 years ago. During your marriage, that means, under state law, you are entitled to half the value of those shares. Chloe stared at the spreadsheets, her mind reeling. Matt had never, ever mentioned owning a stake in the company. She knew he made a massive salary, pulled in heavy commission bonuses, but an equity partner? He hid this from me, she whispered. very likely structured that way 18 months ago. In addition, there is a substantial high-yield investment account that I highly doubt you knew existed. Chloe shook her head slowly. This is exactly why he was terrified of a divorce, Diane continued, tapping the paper. And this is why he spent 2 months groveling. In a standard, contested divorce, you would walk away with half of everything acquired during the marriage. The house, the business equity, the investment portfolio, the cars. He knew that. So he played dirty. He lured you back, got you to drop the petition, and planned to quietly bleed the accounts dry. But I withdrew the petition. He thinks he won. Exactly. And that is our kill shot. While he is relaxed, while he thinks he played you like a fiddle, we assemble the nuke. We file the new petition only when the trap is fully set. We will leave him zero room to maneuver. Chloe left the office and sat on a bench outside in the office park. The wind was biting, but she just sat there, thinking. Not about the money or the equity. She was thinking about the fact that the man she had slept next to for 12 years was a complete stranger. He wasn't just a cheater, that she could have eventually wrapped her head around, maybe even survived. He was a sociopathic manipulator who cried on demand and used his own child's heartbreak as leverage to protect his bank accounts. That evening, she called Martha and told her everything, sparing no details. Her mother was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke, and her voice sounded entirely different, quiet, yet fiercely proud. Chloe, I need you to hear me. You are 10 times stronger than I ever was. When your father did this to me, I just tucked my tail and ran. You are standing your ground and going to war. I am so damn proud of you. Chloe hung up and sat in the dark living room. She didn't feel like a warrior. She was just doing what had to be done, step by step, just like drafting blueprints. Lay the foundation, frame the walls, raise the roof. Except this wasn't a house. It was her new life. Hers and Leo's. Without Matt. The hardest thing wasn't keeping her mouth shut. It was keeping the smile on her face. But Chloe mastered it over the next 2 weeks. She smiled when Matt called at noon saying, "Miss you." She smiled when he walked in at 6 with a bottle of Cabernet. She smiled when he wrapped his arms around her waist before bed and whispered, "I'm so glad we survived this." She smiled, and every single smile felt like swallowing a mouthful of crushed glass. Jess called daily. Not to offer emotional support, but for status updates. Did you secure the W2S? Did you pull the routing numbers? Did you email Diane? Jess became her general, her war room, her absolute anchor. Without her, Chloe might have snapped, not from the grief, but from the sheer exhaustion of the cognitive dissonance. Living in 2 realities simultaneously was draining her soul. In one, she was the submissive, reconciled wife. In the other, a black widow weaving a legal web. In the 3rd week of this psychological marathon, something happened that Chloe hadn't pre-calculated. Matt brought Leo home from a Saturday afternoon movie, and as Leo was taking off his sneakers in the mudroom, he casually asked, "Mom, who is Vanessa?" Chloe froze. The wooden spoon in her hand stopped, stirring the pasta sauce. "What?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice level. Some lady named Vanessa called Dad's phone. He walked away to talk to her and kept his voice real low. I asked him about it, and he said it was just a client from work. But he was smiling. Not his work smile, a different one. Chloe slowly set the spoon down, turned around, and knelt in front of her son. "It was probably just a coworker, buddy," she said calmly. "Dad deals with a lot of people. Go wash your hands. Dinner is almost ready." Leo jogged to the bathroom, and Chloe stood gripping the edge of the stove, staring at the boiling water. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. He was taking calls from his mistress in front of their child, flashing that intimate smile. A 10-year-old boy had picked up on something she had spent 2 months blinding herself to. Kids really do smell the rot faster than adults. That night, after Matt had driven off to yet another emergency client dinner more lazy, arrogant lies, Chloe called Diane. "I can't do this anymore. How much longer?" 1 week, the attorney replied coolly. "We are at the finish line. I just need the independent corporate valuation of his equity. I have a forensic accountant on it right now. Hold the line, Chloe. Just a few more days." Chloe held the line, but that final week was absolute agony. Every night she lay next to Matt, feeling a visceral, physical revulsion, not just toward him, but toward the entire grotesque theater production they were living in. Her sleep deteriorated. Deep shadows formed under her eyes, and Matt noticed. "You look exhausted, babe," he said over breakfast, pouring her coffee. "Why don't you take a PTO day? Rest up. The deadline is killing me." It was her default excuse, repeated so often it was practically muscle memory. "You push yourself too hard, Chloe. You're not made of steel." She looked at him, looked at his handsome face, the faux concern furrowing his brow, the crinkles around his eyes that she used to find so endearing. She felt a wave of nausea, not made of steel. True. But she had turned out to be forged from something much harder than he realized, harder than she herself had ever known. Diane called on Thursday. "We have the payload, the corporate valuation, the bank traces, the deed, the offshore tracking. It's entirely bulletproof. The petition is drafted. Come sign it." Chloe drove to the firm on her lunch break. She signed the papers. Her hand was steady as a surgeon's, just like the first time. Only the first time, she had signed out of unbearable pain. This time, she was signing out of absolute, crystalline clarity. "He will be served by a process server within 72 hours, Diane said, slipping the files into a thick binder. "Brace yourself for impact. He is going to try to break you. He will play the pity card. He will use your son as a human shield, and when that fails, he will threaten you. Do not engage. All communication goes strictly through me. If he shows up at the house screaming, you do not open the door. Call 911 if you feel threatened. Call me anytime, day or night." Chloe went home and began packing Matt's life away. Methodically, precisely, exactly how she drafted architectural blueprints. Suits, ties, casual wear, shoes, his books, his expensive shaving kit. She packed it all into heavy-duty cardboard boxes and stacked them neatly in the foyer. It took 3 hours. 3 hours, and 12 years of marriage were reduced to 6 brown boxes. Then she drove to Leo's elementary school, picked him up, and drove straight to the suburbs to Martha's house. Chloe had decided it was safer to stay with her mother for the next few days, not out of physical fear, but out of tactical necessity. Leo didn't need to be in the blast radius when the bomb detonated. "Are we staying at Grandma's?" Leo asked from the back seat. "Yeah, buddy. Just for a few days." "What about Dad?" "Dad has some things he needs to sort out. He'll come see you later." Leo went quiet, staring out the window at the passing strip malls, the bare trees, the glowing streetlights. Then he said very quietly, "Mom, you guys are fighting again." Lie. She had lied to him so many times over the last few months. "Dad's traveling. Dad's working late. Everything is fine." "No more lies, Leo," she said, keeping her eyes glued to the asphalt. "I won't lie to you. Dad and I are having a really hard time. I am trying to fix things so that you are safe and happy, but I need you to trust me right now, even if you don't understand what's happening. Can you do that?" "I can," he said with utter seriousness. Then he added, "Just promise you won't cry, okay? I hate it when you cry." Chloe bit her lips so hard she tasted copper, and nodded. She didn't cry. Martha's house smelled of pot roast and safety. Her mother opened the door, took one look at her daughter and grandson, and just said, "Come inside. No questions." Chloe had briefed her on the drive over. Martha immediately took over, sitting Leo at the kitchen table, handing him a plate of chocolate chip cookies and a glass of milk, and putting a movie on the iPad. Chloe retreated to her old childhood bedroom cramped, with faded floral wallpaper and the narrow twin bed she had slept in for 18 years. She sat by the window. The sun was setting early, casting long, harsh shadows across the snowy front lawn. Her phone was silent. Matt didn't know yet. But tomorrow, or the next day, or Friday, the hammer would fall. Matt called on Friday evening. Chloe was standing at her mother's stove, stirring a pot of soup. When her phone lit up with his name, she let it ring for 5 full seconds, just staring at it. Then she swiped to answer. "Chloe, I just got home, and there are boxes everywhere. What the hell is going on?" His voice was confused, annoyed, but not panicked yet. He hadn't seen the legal courier yet. "Your things," Chloe said, her tone dead flat. "I packed them." "What? Why?" What happened? I filed for divorce. Again, dead silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Chloe could hear his breath hitching, fast and erratic. Chloe, are you joking? We fixed this. You said yourself. Stop, Matt, she cut him off. I was standing outside your office door last month, the day I withdrew the first petition. I heard your phone call with Vanessa. Every single word. The idiot took the bait. Remember that? Silence again. But a different kind of silence. Not confused. Terminal. Chloe could practically hear the gears grinding, the entire elaborate stage production he had built crumbling into ash. His master plan. His 2 months on his knees incinerated in a fraction of a second. Chloe, you misunderstood, he stammered, his voice suddenly frantic, desperate, shifting into hyperdrive. That was a business call. Vanessa and I were talking about a client. He's been stringing us along for months, and I was just blowing off steam. Don't, Chloe said. Please, have some dignity. You lied to my face for 2 months. You stood in our hallway, holding our son, and wept. And that was a lie, too. You weaponized Leo to manipulate me. You used my absolute trust to protect your portfolio. I know about the business equity, Matt. The 20% you never bothered to mention. I know about the offshore accounts. My lawyer knows exactly where the money is. What lawyer? The desperation vanished. The voice turned vicious, sharp as a razor. The mask slipped right off, exposing the rotting wood beneath. You hired a lawyer? Behind my back? Behind your back? Chloe let out a dry, humorless laugh. Are you seriously lecturing me about doing things behind someone's back? Listen to me. Let's sit down and talk like adults. No lawyers, no courtrooms, no hysterics. All communication goes through my attorney, Diane Sterling. I will email you her contact info. Do not call my phone again, Matt. If you want to discuss custody arrangements for Leo, your lawyer can call mine. You cannot take my son away from me. I'm not taking him away. I am protecting him from you. She hung up. Her hands were shaking violently the first time since this nightmare began. Not from fear, it was the massive adrenaline dump, like the sheer terror of jumping out of an airplane and waiting for the parachute to deploy. Martha was standing in the doorway, watching her daughter. She walked over, turned off the burner under the soup, and said, "Sit down." Chloe sat. Her mother placed a mug of hot chamomile tea in front of her. It was exactly what she used to do whenever Chloe was sick as a little girl. Chamomile cures everything. Chloe wrapped her freezing hands around the ceramic mug and closed her eyes. He's going to escalate, Martha said. I know men like him. First they beg, then they bare their teeth. I have the best lawyer in the state. Lawyers fight in court. You have to fight the psychological war. Guard your heart, honey. Martha was right. Matt escalated the very next morning. Not by calling Chloe directly, he knew she would block him. He initiated a proxy war. First, he called Jess. Talk some sense into her, he demanded. She is making the biggest mistake of her life. I will do whatever it takes to save my marriage. Tell her I'm a changed man. Jess let him talk, then calmly replied, Matt, I'm only going to say this once. I heard what you said on that phone call. Chloe quoted you verbatim. You called her an idiot. You conned her for 2 months. Lose my number. And if you try to use Leo as a bargaining chip, I will personally make sure the judge hears every single filthy detail of your little corporate cover-up. She hung up on him. Jess called Chloe immediately to report the strike. He is panicking, the lawyer said. That is fantastic. Panicking men make catastrophic legal errors. Then, unbelievably, Matt called Martha. That was arrogant even for him. Martha picked up the phone, listened to his first 2 sentences, and unleashed hell. I tolerated you for 12 years because my daughter loved you, Martha hissed into the receiver. She doesn't love you anymore, so I can finally say what I've wanted to say since the day I met you. You are a weak, pathetic excuse for a man. You are a little boy playing dress-up in a tailored suit. Do not call this house. Do not drive past this house. And if you so much as step a toe on my front lawn, I will call 911 and have you arrested for trespassing. Chloe, standing in the hallway, covered her mouth to keep from laughing a wild, hysterical laugh. Her quiet, conflict-avoidant mother, who had spent 20 years shrinking into herself after her own divorce, had finally bared her teeth to protect her cub. 3 days later, Matt was officially served with the divorce papers, along with the itemized list of financial demands drafted by Diane Sterling. Chloe vividly imagined him sitting in his office reading the list: the house, the business equity, the investment accounts, the SUV, everything forensically documented, everything legally cornered. She could almost hear his jaw grinding. His reaction was entirely predictable. He hired an aggressively expensive corporate divorce attorney. 2 days later, Diane received the counterfiling. Matt was contesting the division of the business equity, claiming the shares were purchased with premarital funds, making them exempt. A blatant, but a lie he was willing to litigate. "Don't lose a wink of sleep over it," Diane said over the phone. "I have the routing numbers. The funds to buy his partner buy-in came directly from your joint checking account, which was opened 3 years after your wedding. He can spin whatever fairy tale he wants. Forensic accounting doesn't care about his feelings." The court date was set for 6 weeks out. 6 weeks of grueling waiting, frayed nerves, and insomnia. Chloe threw herself into her work. The downtown housing project she had been agonizing over was entering its final phase. Richard Harrison, the senior partner at her firm, a massive man with bushy eyebrows and a surprisingly gentle demeanor, called her into his glass office. "Chloe, I don't poke around in my architects' personal lives, but I'm not blind. I know you're going through a meat grinder. If you need FMLA or just some paid time off, it's yours. No questions asked." "I don't need time off, Richard," she replied. "I need the exact opposite. If I stop working right now, my brain will eat itself." He nodded, respecting her boundary. "Fair enough. The housing project. It's spectacular work. The client is ecstatic. I'm putting you up for promotion. Senior architect. Effective in April. Think about it." Chloe walked out of his office and leaned her forehead against the cool glass of the hallway. A promotion. She had been grinding for this title for 3 years, and it finally arrived now, standing in the radioactive crater of her personal life. It felt like the universe tossing her a life preserver. Meanwhile, Matt shifted his tactics. He stopped calling her, stopped harassing her friends. Instead, he initiated a psychological campaign through Leo. He was too smart to do it directly. He just started showing up at the elementary school. He would wait for Leo by the chain-link fence, walk him to the park, buy him ice cream, take him to the batting cages. Legally, he had every right. There was no temporary custody order in place yet. But Chloe knew exactly what was driving this super dad routine. Leo would come home to Martha's house glowing, chattering about Dad, and every single sentence was a micro-incision in Chloe's heart. "Dad says he misses us so much. Dad says he wants to come home. Dad says you misunderstood him, Mom." Chloe listened. Her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. She wouldn't explain to a 10-year-old that his superhero father was a manipulative sociopath. It would be psychological abuse to both Leo and herself. A child cannot carry the weight of adult sins, and feeding him half-truths was just another form of lying. She called Diane in a panic. "He is weaponizing my child against me. He's not doing it overtly, but he's playing the tragic, misunderstood victim. It's brainwashing. Textbook alienation tactic," Diane said, entirely unruffled. "Document every single interaction, dates, times, locations, and verbatim quotes of what the boy tells you. It is pure gold for the custody hearing. And whatever you do, do not react emotionally in front of your son. Stone face." Chloe documented it. She bought a legal pad and logged every ice cream trip, every batting cage session, every guilt trip phrase Matt planted in their son's head. The pages filled up, and with every line she wrote, she realized the man she had married was a total phantom. He never existed. She had sketched him onto a blank canvas, the way Leo drew pictures. A week before the trial, Matt showed up at Martha's house, unannounced. He just stood by the white picket fence at 7 a.m., right as Chloe was walking Leo out to the car for school. She saw him and froze on the porch steps. He looked awful. He had dropped weight. His cheekbones jutted out, and a rough stubble covered his jaw. His wool overcoat was wrinkled, like he had slept in his car. "Chloe," he called out. "5 minutes. No lawyers, no witnesses, just you and me." I have absolutely nothing to say to you, but I have things to say to you. Please. Leo stood by the car door, looking nervously back and forth between his parents. Chloe refused to have a screaming match on the lawn in front of him. Leo, get in the car. Put your seatbelt on. I'll be right there. Her son obeyed. Chloe walked down the driveway and stopped a few feet from the fence. The wooden slats were a flimsy, symbolic barrier, but they felt like the Berlin Wall. Talk, she said. I'm guilty. I know. What you heard in my office. It was disgusting. But I swear to God, Chloe, I was just saying what Vanessa wanted to hear. I was playing a part for her, not for you. You played a part for everyone, Matt. That's the terrifying part. You've been acting for so long you don't even know what the truth is anymore. The truth is, I can't survive without you and Leo. I'm not sleeping. I'm not eating. My numbers at work are tanking because I can't look at a spreadsheet. I lost everything. You didn't lose anything. You threw it away. There's a massive difference. He stood there, his lower lip actually quivering. Chloe stared at his face, digging deep into her own soul to find even a microscopic drop of pity for him. She found nothing. Where love had lived, where agony had burned, where rage had boiled, there was just a vast, frozen lake, completely calm. I'll drop the countersuit, he said suddenly. Take the assets. The house, the equity, the accounts. Take it all. Just please, don't take Leo away from me. Chloe narrowed her eyes. It could be genuine, or it could be his final, desperate gambit. With Matt, the line between reality and manipulation no longer existed, but it didn't matter. Nobody is taking Leo away from you. You're his father. The judge will establish a visitation schedule, but his primary residence will be with me. I need to see him every day. That's for the court to decide. I'm done here, Matt. I have to get my son to school. She turned her back on him, got into her SUV, and backed out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, she watched Matt standing by the fence, his arms hanging limply at his sides, watching them drive away. Leo turned around in the passenger seat and waved at his dad through the back window. Chloe saw Matt slowly raise his hand and wave back. The trial took place on a rainy Wednesday. The county courthouse felt sterile and imposing long hallways with scuffed linoleum, wooden benches, and the faint smell of bleach and old paper. Diane Sterling sat next to Chloe at the plaintiff's table, impeccably dressed, utterly calm, with a binder of evidence as thick as a cinder block. Matt sat across the aisle with his lawyer, a slick, aggressive man in a bespoke suit whose face projected professional arrogance. Chloe forced herself not to look at Matt, but out of her peripheral vision, she saw him aggressively clicking a ballpoint pen, his nervous tick. She remembered him doing the exact same thing at Leo's parent-teacher conference in 3rd grade, when the teacher complained Leo talked too much in class. Matt had leaned over and whispered, "Wonder where he gets that from?" And she had stifled a laugh while the teacher glared at them. Another lifetime, someone else's life. The hearing lasted 2 grueling hours. Diane was a surgeon. She laid out the paper trail calmly and methodically. The joint checking statements proving the business equity was marital property. The mortgage documents, the forensic valuation of the LLC, the hidden 401k transfers. Matt's lawyer objected, blustered, and argued the funds were protected premarital assets. But the math was inescapable, and the judge saw right through the smokescreen. The ruling came down a week later. Chloe was awarded the suburban house. The 20% business equity was split down the middle. Matt was legally ordered to either buy out Chloe's half at fair market value or liquidate the shares. The investment accounts were split 50-50. Chloe was granted primary physical custody of Leo. Matt was awarded standard visitation, alternating weekends and 1 dinner a week. Diane called with the finalized decree, and Chloe stood in the middle of her mother's living room, pressing the phone to her ear, completely silent. "You won," the lawyer said. "Congratulations." Won. A bizarre word. Chloe felt no triumph, no elation. What she felt was a bone-deep, crushing exhaustion, like the fever breaking after a month-long illness. The sickness was gone, and now she just had to relearn how to walk. Without the fever, without the delirium of a fake marriage, she hung up, walked into the hallway, and saw Martha watching her. Martha didn't ask. She just looked. "It's over, Mom," Chloe said. and Martha finally cried. For the first time in 6 months, not out of grief, but out of sheer, overwhelming relief. Spring arrived quietly, the way it always does after a brutal winter. Not all at once, but in fragments. The smell of wet soil, the sound of birds returning to the gutters, the puddles reflecting bright blue skies instead of gray clouds. Chloe stood on the front porch of her house, and breathed in the crisp April air. It felt like a blank sheet of drafting paper. She and Leo had moved back from Martha's right after the judge signed the decree. Chloe had been terrified that the house would feel haunted, poisoned by the lies. But when she unlocked the front door and stepped inside, she was met with an unexpected, peaceful silence. Not the deafening, traumatic silence of November, a quiet that belonged entirely to her. Leo ran in first, sprinting upstairs to check his room. Everything was untouched, the Legos on the shelves, the dinosaur posters on the walls. "Mom!" he yelled down the stairs. "I'm home!" Chloe smiled. 2 words, and the vice grip around her chest that she had been carrying for half a year finally snapped open. The first week was about establishing the new rhythm. Morning coffee alone, making Leo's lunch alone, dropping him off, driving downtown, drafting blueprints, eating lunch at her desk, picking Leo up, helping with homework, reading before bed. Nobody brewed her coffee, nobody left sticky notes on her nightstand, and it was completely fine. Not agonizing, not lonely, just fine. Like a healed fracture. The bone has fused, the scar is there, but you can walk again. In April, she officially moved into her new role, senior architect. She got a corner office with a view of an old oak tree and 2 junior architects to manage. She taught them exactly what she knew: how to listen to the flow of a room, how to capture natural light, how to respect the humans who would eventually inhabit their designs. "A house isn't a box," she told them, tapping a blueprint. "A house is a promise that you will be warm, safe, and honest inside these walls." She caught herself on the word honest and paused. Her juniors didn't notice, but she did. Honesty. That was what had been missing from her marriage. Not passion, not shared hobbies, honesty. The foundation was rotting from day one. She just hadn't wanted to look in the basement. Matt saw Leo on his designated weekends. He would pull up into the driveway on Saturday morning, pick him up, and drop him off Sunday night. Chloe would open the door, let Leo out, and shut it. No lingering, no small talk. They communicated purely through sterile text messages, picking him up at 10, dropping off at 7. "Leo has a fever, keeping him home this weekend." Cold, transactional, like neighbors disputing a property line. When Leo came back from his dad's, he was usually thoughtful, but calm. Not depressed, just processing. Chloe never interrogated him. She waited for him to volunteer information, which he did in fragments over dinner. "Dad's living in an apartment downtown. He says it's just for now." Dad put our beach picture on his fridge. "Dad asked how you were doing. I told him you were fine. You are fine, right, Mom?" "I am," Chloe would answer. "I'm fine." One afternoon in late April, the oak tree outside her office was bursting with bright green leaves. Leo came home from school, dropped his backpack, and said, "Mom, Dad doesn't smile the same way anymore." "What do you mean?" "He used to have this really big smile. Now he just looks tired." Chloe knelt down, looking her son in the eye. "Dad is going through a tough transition right now, Leo. But he'll figure it out. Adults always figure it out." "Did you figure it out?" She paused. A question that profound deserved a brutally honest answer, not a platitude. Had she figured it out? The phantom pain still lived in her ribs, flaring up when she least expected it. When a certain song played on Spotify. When she walked past Matt's favorite brand of IPA at the grocery store. When Leo laughed in that specific, guttural way that sounded exactly like his father. But the pain no longer sat in the driver's seat. It no longer dictated her choices, didn't drown her in tears, didn't suffocate her in her sleep. "I'm figuring it out," she answered. "A little bit more every single day." Jess came over on Friday nights. They drank wine on the porch, but they didn't talk about the divorce or Matt anymore. They talked about architecture, corporate mergers, books, and the fact that Jess had finally caved and adopted a golden retriever puppy she named Marshmallow because he was round and completely white. "You've changed," Jess said one evening, swirling her Pinot. "You used to be, I don't know, softer, more yielding. Now you've got this titanium spine." "It was always there," Chloe said, looking out into the yard. "I just never let myself lean on it." Martha drove over on Wednesdays, bringing Tupperware full of meatloaf and playing checkers with Leo. He had gotten really good over the winter and beat his grandmother half the time. Martha had changed, too. She was louder, more vibrant. It was as if watching Chloe fight back had awakened something inside Martha that had been dormant for 20 years. "I signed up for a watercolor class." Martha casually dropped one afternoon while slicing a pie. "You did what?" Chloe nearly dropped her coffee mug. "Watercolor. At the community center. Tuesdays and Thursdays. The instructor says I have a surprisingly steady hand." Chloe looked at her mother, at the color in her cheeks, the spark in her eyes, and felt a profound, unfamiliar warmth rising in her chest. It wasn't pure happiness yet. That was still miles down the road. But it was hope, the undeniable proof that life doesn't end when the floor collapses. It just forces you to build a new floor. In May, Chloe packed up the SUV and took Leo fishing at the lake herself, without Matt. They sat on the grassy bank, their red and white bobbers floating motionless on the glassy water. The sun warmed Chloe's back, and the air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. "Mom," Leo said, keeping his eyes glued to the water, "do you think you'll ever love somebody else? Like, the way you loved Dad?" Chloe stayed quiet for a moment. An honest question demanded an honest answer. "I don't know, buddy," she said softly. "Maybe, someday, but right now, I have you, and I am so incredibly happy with just that. It's enough." Leo nodded, and suddenly, his bobber jerked violently and vanished beneath the surface. Leo shot to his feet, grabbing the rod, yelling in pure adrenaline. "Mom, help!" Chloe scrambled up, grabbing the handle with him. They pulled together, stumbling over their own feet, slipping in the mud, both of them screaming and laughing. And when the fish, a tiny, pathetic little bluegill, finally flopped onto the grass, they both collapsed next to it, laughing so hard tears streamed down their faces. Chloe lay on her back in the grass, staring up at the endless, brilliant blue American sky, watching the cotton candy clouds drift by. She thought to herself, here it is. This was the exact feeling she thought had been burned to the ground forever. Not just happiness, peace. She was no longer trying to build a home on someone else's rotten foundation. She was standing solidly on her own. Like is a simple magic that inspires. Subscribing opens the road to new, soulful discoveries. Listen to the silence between the words. That is where love lives.